guys, let's get started. We are going to be making our hot cocoa bar today. So the first thing you're going to do is just get out your sandpaper and you're going to sand all of these sharp edges on your wood, okay? A good rule of thumb is just to make little small movements back and forth on these edges, and you just want to sand it until you're not going to get any more splinters. I already did that before the video, that way you wouldn't have to just sit here and watch me sand. So feel free to just pause it and get that done, okay? So once all of your pieces are sanded, we're gonna go ahead and assemble our box, okay? So you should have two pieces that are the same size. Those are the sides, the front and the back. You should have a little bit more narrow piece. This is the bottom, and then you have these two small pieces. These are your two sides of your boxes, okay? So the first thing we're gonna do is, I like to say it's kind of like pre-hammering, okay? So we're gonna put a little bit of hammering on our wood before we assemble it, and that'll help us when we're holding it all together. If you have a second person to help you while you hammer, then that is great too, and I'll show you that in just a minute. Okay, so this is the front of my box. It's already red because I just wanted the paint to dry before I started the video, but we're not painting yet. I'll show you the painting steps in just a minute. But this is the front of mine, so I know that across the bottom of my wood, I'm gonna need to put a couple of nails. Okay, so let me just dump all these little nails out. So when it comes to nailing, you think about, this is how it's gonna be assembled. So we have this front piece, and it's going to go right into the edge of that small piece, that the more narrow piece, which is our bottom, okay? So we're gonna put a nail kind of at like the 1/3 point and the 2/3 point. And we want that to be, this is 3/4 inches thick, so we're trying to get it right in between these two, right in the middle of this board. So we're going, about 1/4 of an inch from the very edge. We wanna make sure that we're hammering very straight and far enough away from the edge to get into the wood without splitting anything, okay? So I'm gonna show you. So I'm gonna kind of just hold it there, and I'm gonna hammer it down a little bit. So pretty much I wanna hammer this enough where it's like not wiggly anymore. So I went in pretty good, but I just don't wanna start coming out the other side yet, okay? So I've got one there, and then I do another one at 2/3. Like I said, a little bit away from the edge. So hammer that down, okay? So I hammered it down pretty good, you can see. So I'm just gonna make it as straight as I can, but I'm not quite coming through yet. I got really just right to the edge of the wood. So you can go all the way as much as you can without coming all the way through. Okay, now this is the part that if you have another person to help you, that's great, but if you don't, it's okay too. I'll show you because I'm gonna do it by myself. So I'm gonna lay down my narrow piece, which is the bottom of my box, and I'm going to put my front piece on the top of that. So I'm lining everything up, and I'm just using my 2 pointer fingers to just make sure that everything lines up really good. Then I'm gonna hold my hand on here to make sure that I hold it nice and tight, and that'll give me a chance to hammer that all the way down, okay? So just watch your hands, make sure everything stays lined up. So we should be super flush on the sides and super flush on the bottom, okay? All right, so perfect. So those two are together. Ta-da! So I have my front of my box and I have my bottom. So now I can lay it down like this, and I can get my other wide piece to go on this side. But like I said, it's a lot easier if you pre-hammer. So I'm gonna kind of put these nails just a little bit in there already before I get started. I'm just gotta be careful. I'm on my countertop, so make sure, of course, I don't wanna break that. So as I'm going, and if it starts to get crooked, you either wanna take it out or kind of knock it to make sure it's nice and straight as we go in here. Okay, so I got in here nice and straight. Now I'm able to go and put this on here. Okay, so again, I'm just using my fingers and I'm making sure that it's all flush. Okay, so I'm gonna hold it tight and hammer all the way. So just be careful if you start to come out, or if it starts to break or anything, you kind of want to see that before you finish. That way you can pull it out and kind of fix it. So don't hammer it all the way down if you see it like coming through or poking through or anything. You want to fix that if you can. Okay, so now I've got the two sides. The front and the back, and now I just need to work on these side pieces, okay? So now, before I pre-hammer on this, I wanna see how it fits on here, okay? So it should be fitting just like that. I can see, it's kind of got a little bit of a wood grain on it. You can see that it's side to side. That's how it should go in your box. So it shouldn't be up and down. Up and down is not gonna fit the right way, okay? So it should be side to side. Now on this one, I'm gonna do a nail right in the center on the sides, the side edges, I guess I should say. So another one right here on this side edge, and then one right in the middle. So I'm doing 3 on these little end pieces, okay? All right, okay, so I'm making sure those are as straight as I can get, and then I'm gonna stand up. You wanna just kind of work on a hard surface, so like I'm working on a countertop, but if you have a table, just make sure you're nice and sturdy. So now I'm making sure the bottom is super flush and even on the edges. So once I've got the bottom section really good, I'm gonna go ahead and nail that one first. If it moves at all, then make sure you just correct it as you go. And just watch your fingers, okay? And then for the sides, I just wanna make sure it's nice and straight. So kind of even with however the spacing is on the bottom. If there's a teeny tiny overlap, just make that flush all the way across. And that way you can finish hammering that side, okay? And then let me get this one. So again, I'm just kind of pulling to make sure I've got that even side. There you go, and that side is good to go. So I've got the end on my box. All right, now same thing for this side. So I'm gonna flip it over, make sure I see right where the side is gonna connect. And then I'm gonna do a nail on the middle of the side. And a nail on this side. And a nail on the center of the bottom, okay? Now, I should have like 3 or 4 extra nails, actually 4 or 5. So if you have some extra nails and you wanna add some more reinforcement, I'd probably add it on the sides. So you could even do 2 on the sides if you wanted to. You shouldn't need it, but in case you've got anything that's a little bit wonky, you have some extra nails, or if you break one or you bend one, you should have some so you can go back and fix that, okay? So let me just add this now on the side. So I'm making sure my bottom is straight, flush, and centered, and then I'm gonna give it pressure down and hammer that on without hitting my finger, okay? And then just, as I said, just making sure this side is as even as I can, so I can get those 45-degree angles in there. I mean, 90-degree angles, everything nice and flush and square. So I'm pulling everything tight and square as much as I can before I hammer that where it's gonna go. Ta-da! I have a box. All right, so now, like I said, I had already painted this red just because I was trying to do that before you came so that I would have some time for it to dry. So on the front of your box, you don't have to actually even paint this side. So you can see how I literally just painted this center part red. But if you get it on the sides, it's not a big deal. We're really just trying to get red on here that's the same size as like our stencil because that's what's gonna turn out to be red in the end, okay? So we're just gonna rub red all over the front of this. I'm just gonna pretend because I've already done it. This is actually 2 coats. So when you put it on the first time, it's gonna look a little bit thin. Let that dry. And then put a second coat on and let that dry before you go to this next step, okay? And this is okay if you're just going side to side. You don't have to bounce it like we do sometimes, which we will in just a little bit. But side to side, you wanna get this whole rectangle on the front covered, but don't worry about these little side pieces. If you get red on them, it's not a big deal. We're gonna paint white over them anyway, so it's no big deal. All right, so now that I've got this, it's time for me to get my stencil. Move my stuff to the side, because I usually will spill paint if I don't pay too much attention. All right, so now I'm gonna use my little scraper card and I'm gonna just scrape the front of this stencil, and we're trying to get this clear transfer tape to pick up the vinyl and put it onto our box, okay? So let me just scrape this real good, and then when I peel this up, look, part of it stayed behind. So I like when that happens, I can show you what to do. So if part of it stays behind, I'm just gonna pinch it kind of on both sides and get that transfer tape to start doing its job and actually picking up these letters. So this one's being a little bit stubborn. Okay, so once you get going on a letter, it should continue to pick it up. I like to peel like at a diagonal. And even if I have to pinch every letter, you'll see I'll have this whole stencil done in like 30 seconds. It's really not a big deal. So I'm just pinching on the front and on the back at the very bottom corner of that letter as I peel diagonally, and it just helps it to get all off, okay? So we're trying to get to this, where we have the transfer tape and the lettering. And then I'm gonna go apply this right on my box. So the good thing about this being like having a little swirls and stuff is it doesn't have to be exact, but it should fit pretty good right on your red section of your box, okay? So I'm gonna put that on there. Once I have it where I like it, I kind of just push it down with my hand, and I'm gonna go back with my scraper card. Again, don't do this step until your red is dry because your stencil's not gonna stick, okay? So now we get to this part, and we're gonna scrape this down. We're trying to get that black vinyl to stick really good, okay? So once we have scraped it pretty good, taken out some of our anger, frustration, now we're gonna peel that clear off, okay? So you just grab that and peel it from the corner. This part should come off really easily, and you just wanna make sure all that black vinyl stays behind. So mine stuck perfectly, so it looks awesome. Okay, so now we have our stencil on. Now let's kind of work on the rest of the box just a little bit. So we are going, whenever I am applying, I've already painted the background red, and then I put the stencil on, I do something called sealing the stencil. And what that means is I'm just gonna take this sponge that still has the red paint on it, I'm not gonna dip it again because I don't need a ton of paint, and I'm gonna do a super light coat over all of this stencil. Now the point of that is if there's some leakage, which tends to happen with wood because it's not perfectly flat, it'll leak in red and not in our white color so that we can kind of get those fine crisp lines, okay? So I'm just gonna put that on there, good. All right, so now that's super thin. Like I said, I even go back a little bit with my dry side of my sponge and I just kind of wipe it because I really just need a super thin coat and I don't need all this red that's like on the actual vinyl. So feel free to just go back and wipe it with that dry side of your sponge, okay? So now, wipe all this paint so it gets a little bit dry. Now that we've got our other colors in here, what we're gonna do, and this is all just up to you. This is preference. If you don't wanna do certain steps, if you just wanna go for solid white, if you're gonna want super crisp, that's up to you. But I'm gonna show you kind of a little bit of different things you can do. So you have this brown. So what I'm gonna do with the brown is I'm gonna use that to kind of give me a little bit of antique edges. So I'm gonna dip that and I'm literally gonna just wipe it off, see some sponge texture on here, okay? And I'm just gonna go on the edges, okay? So nothing about this is perfect. This is not supposed to be, I'm just giving it some color. This is going underneath the white, okay? So this is just what's gonna be showing under the white. I don't want anything crazy thick. If you put it on thick, that's fine, but you'll have to wait for it to dry a little bit longer. So in my case, I'm literally just kind of smearing it on there, getting some kind of antiques on the sides, okay? So you can kind of see, let me wipe this off. So literally just getting those, if I want to, I can do lightly like that, give it kind of a little bit of old wood character. This is totally up to you. If not, I'm just gonna go right on the corners, all on the sides here, and around my box, okay? So I'm gonna add a little bit in the middle, just because I feel like it, but we'll see how it turns out if I wanna cover it solidly in white or not, okay? So I got a little bit here, I'm kind of wiping it. Like I said, I don't want it to be really wet, so I'm kind of wiping off if I see too much texture of that paint. So a little bit on these edges, so my red should like almost be dry already, that little thin layer that I did. And that's all I need. So I'm kind of just adding, like I said, just a little bit of antique color. And you can go back and even add more later if you want it to look distressed at the end. But that's all I need for now. So I set that aside. Okay, so now the next thing I need to do is the white. So you have some choices. So this is kind of like a little white, light gray. It's called agreeable gray, actually. It's like a super light, pretty color that kind of matches all kinds of decor. So I really like this color. So what we can do, so I'm going to kind of show you a couple different options. So first, you can either do like a distressed look. So if you want to do that, almost looking like you dry brushed it, we're going to dip it. We're going to do just like we did kind of with our brown. So I definitely want to get more coverage on here, but I'm doing it just in a like side to side motion. Okay, and so we could go back and forth with our white color and our brown color as it dries and kind of alternate so that we can get that good coverage that we want, but still getting that kind of like antique-y look. So for example, if we're doing that on the front, we could look like this, like you could just drag it like that. So you want to get some coverage so that you can have that, you know, contrast between the lettering and that white that's on the front, but nothing too crazy. So if you want to do that, that's one option, okay? Option 2 is to do it like a solid white, okay, which is actually what I'm going to do. So I'm going to do it solid. It's going to take a little bit more time, and I'm really only going to focus on the outside of the box. The inside, I'll just rub it with white. So I'll kind of just show you that. So I kind of go in here and reach in and just kind of rub side to side and be okay with this being white. In fact, I'm not going to worry too much about all the way down in there, but you feel free. This is really just preference. If you want it to look super perfect on the inside, you can, but it's going to be full of those mason jars and cups, so you really shouldn't have to worry too much about the inside, okay? So these top edges, they suck up a lot of paint, so you're going to want to just use a little bit more paint on these top edges and kind of just go back and forth. So even though I am doing a solid, I still like doing it nice and thick and solid. I still like the way that it looks. It has a little bit of that brown showing through. So it's almost like, you know, you have that stained wood with that old paint on top of it. So I'm just rubbing those top edges to get kind of that solid color so you can see. All right. But then as far as the sides go, I'll show you, especially on this front part. We're not going to do like a smearing like we've been doing. I'm actually going to do this bouncing technique, which is where you bounce that sponge up and down, okay? So I really want to get a full coverage on this front because I want my red and white to look nice and crisp, okay? So let me just kind of show you that. But like I said, you can just kind of play with this. If you don't like it in the end, if you think it's too solid, you can always go back and sand some off. Or you can use the brown and add some more streaks in there. It's totally preference, just whatever goes with your decor, whatever style you like, okay? So let me just go in here and just bounce this around. All right, so I kind of just work in circles a little bit. I want to be able to see that stencil, okay? So even though I'm getting some good coverage and I really want this to be pretty much a solid white on here, I don't want to have so much paint that it's just glopping everywhere, okay? If I do that, it's just going to make a mess when I take the stencil off, and it's really you're going to be able to see that texture in the end, at the end of your project. So you don't want to have it to be too thick, okay? So just like I said, just keep working around like in these little circles, going back and forth, kind of recovering your steps if you need to, just to get that even coverage. Because this is one of those steps where I say what you see is what you get, because this is our final product. So if you don't like the way the white looks, just keep working on it until you do like the way that it looks, okay? But like I said, you can sand it at the end or later if it's dry. I'm going to do that on my edges, but not on everything. Okay, so I want this front to be nice and solid. So I'm going to go back and I'm just checking and make sure if I have any spots where the bubbles have kind of popped and are showing some red through. I'm just going back and moving all of this around real good. Okay, so I think I've got some nice coverage here. Let me show you what that looks like. Ta-da! So really you can't see my stencils anymore. You can't see the red anymore. I've just got that white, okay? So I'm going to work a little bit on my sides just so I can let that dry a tiny bit. I'm not as concerned with my side, so I'm going to do a little bit more smearing because I don't want to sit here and bounce all of that, but just depending on what you enjoy and what you want it to look like I said. So I had a lot of brown show through on this top part, so I'm going to actually dab that again to give that a little bit of that white gray color, okay? And then I'm going to go back on my side. All right, so you would just keep working around, fill on the middle as much as you want, on the inside of the box, and do the sides and the back as much as you want, okay? So now typically this is where we would, we need to let this dry before you can work on it. I'm gonna go ahead and peel off my my stencils so I can show you what it's gonna look like in the end for the sake of time. But in your case, you probably want to pause and wait. Maybe this is your time to go hang out and talk, or go get a snack or a drink or whatever, because you really want this part to be dry, okay? So what I used for this part, I have this little poker. It's literally just a stick with a needle on it, so it's nothing fancy. But even if you have like a safety pin or a needle, anything you have, that'll work to kind of peel this vinyl off. And then wait to do this part till it's dry. I'm gonna do it when it's wet. If you do it when it's wet, you have to be super careful because you just don't want to smear that white paint around. Because I tend to, of course, get it like on my hands. So I'm gonna try to be, okay, this is dry so I can touch. This is a little bit tacky. So we'll see if I can see where all this paint is without getting my hair into all of the white paint. Here, let's try to be a little bit safer and move that white paint. All right, so I'm just gonna start peeling up these little pieces because I want you to be able to see what it's really gonna look like in the end. So as you peel these up, these are just trash, so you can just make a pile over to the side. It is also a little bit hard when it's not dry because everything is glared and kind of shiny. It's hard to see where the stencils are. Okay, so I got my little A. Yeah, the kids are so excited. I feel like every day since we've had this, the kids have just asked if we can have hot chocolate. So I think this is going to be a staple in our house that they're really going to enjoy having this little hot cocoa bar. Of course, they just want the marshmallows too, right? Let me just keep on getting that. And just be careful when you go on here with your needle. You just don't want to scratch the wood too bad, okay? So just be careful that you don't do that. Of course, if you're going for the more rustic look, then it's totally okay. You can scratch away. You might want to sand it in the end anyway. Whoop! Okay. Those little tails under here. So usually once you get a letter started, you should be able to peel all of that letter off. So hopefully it doesn't give you too hard of a time. So we're using a special type of vinyl. It's actually a pretty strong vinyl. It's rated for 3 years is how long it would last. But I've just found it's my favorite to use for stencils because I think it gives you a good seal enough to paint and not have too much leakage. So I really haven't seen any leaks at all on my box. So in the original sample I did a lot more rustic, so I just like scraped the white paint on there or did it side to side. But on this one, of course, I did the solid color. So you can kind of look at the two and decide which one, you know, is your preference. All right, I think I might have one more. No? I couldn't tell if I had one more little swirly thing on the top because it's a little bit hard to see. But no, I think that's it. So check this out. Ta-da! All right, so there is our hot cocoa bar. So that is kind of, like I said, this is the a little bit more fine-tuned version. So if you bounce that paint, you'll get that solid color, and I love the way this looks. But I can't wait to see what yours look like, and I want to see all the different things that you fill it with. The last thing I would do on my box, which I can't really do now because my paint is not super dry, but I'll show you kind of on this side one that's not solid. All right, let's do this one. It's a little bit more solid. What I would do in the end, so just wait for it to be super dry, and then you can go back with your sandpaper, and just like we did at the beginning, how we sanded the edges, I would sand all of these little edges around, especially if you opted for like the really solid look. When you sand those edges around, it's going to take out some of that white paint and it's going to reveal that brown. So that was why we put that brown there on at the beginning, because that way when you sand it, you kind of get a little bit of those dark corners. So I would literally just go around those edges just to reveal that brown, okay? I hope you enjoyed your project, and I can't wait to see your box when they're finished, and I want to see them filled with all of your goodies. Merry Christmas, and I'll see you next month.